Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar for the NVMe Plugfest number 7 coming up in May. My name is Mara Bernazzani. I'm the Communications Coordinator at the UNH IOL. I'll serve as your moderator today. Our speaker today and presenter is David Wolf, the UNH IOL Senior Engineer in Data Center Technologies. After David's presentation, we will have a Q&A session. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and you can do that by using the question box on your screen. We'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. We'll also be sending everyone the final presentation along with today's recording, either today or tomorrow. However, in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Carrie Munson. So now I'm going to turn it over to David so we can get started, and we hope you enjoy it.
All right, thank you, Mara, and thank you everyone for taking the time to attend today's webinar and hopefully prepare ourselves well for NVMe Plugfest number 7. First, going to do a quick introduction about who we are at UNH IOL. I think most of us are familiar with the work that we do here, but just as a refresher, we're based up here at the University of New Hampshire, up in the northeastern United States. It's a state university based here in Durham. Got about 12,000 undergraduate students and 2,000 graduate students, and happily about 100 of those students are working at the Interoperability Lab. Most of those are electrical engineering and computer science majors, and they work on various projects here at the lab in data communications and storage, and a few of them are even working on NVMe, testing SSDs and preparing those test tools. And if you've spent any time with our tools or at events in the past, I'm sure you've gotten the chance to work with some of our students. We've been doing interoperability testing here at UNH since 1988. And NVMe is actually one of the newer technologies that we're involved in. It's been since 2012 that we've been working directly with the NVM Express organization to build this integrators list program and this series of Plugfests. And this Plugfest number 7 is the latest in that series. So hopefully you're planning on attending this event upcoming May 22nd through 25th at our headquarters here on 21 Madbury Road in Durham, New Hampshire. So that's a quick introduction about UNH IOL, who we are, how we got involved in NVMe. But here's the agenda for most of today's webinar. First, I'm going to talk about new test requirements, some things that have come out of our work with the NVMe Interop and Compliance Committee, and any kind of updates that have happened there. We'll talk a little bit about test tools, things that we're using, things you can expect to see at the event, and of course the UNH IOL software that we provide to all members of our testing service to help prepare. Third, I'm going to talk about what you can do in your own lab to prepare for the event, to make sure that it goes smoothly. And then finally, planning your visit, just a few of the logistics, travel things to keep in mind, and then we'll have a Q&A session. If you have attended these webinars in the past, or if you attended the Plugfest in the past and you kind of know the ins and outs of attending, that last bullet there on planning your visit might be a little redundant for you. You might be familiar with that information. If you feel like dropping off, feel free, but we will be doing the Q&A at the very end. So first item on the agenda is new test requirements. If you recall, last summer, summer 2016, we worked really closely with the Interop and Compliance Committee in NVMe and defined over 100 new test cases. And we actually executed those at our Plugfest number 6 in October. And all of those new test cases were considered FYI. You could think of FYI as testing the test. We're not requiring them of the devices yet. We're not requiring that people pass those tests yet to be on the integrators list, but they could become requirements in the future. Well, now we're in the future. So most of those tests, most of those 100 new test cases that we added in Plugfest number 6 have been made mandatory for Plugfest number 7. So if you went to Plugfest number 6 and had maybe some failures on some FYI tests, you'll really want to pay attention to those coming into Plugfest number 7 and make sure that all of those are passing. All of that's been indicated in the test suite So you can look at the latest version of the test suite and see which ones have been made mandatory and which ones have remained FYI. And it's worth saying that, that process of moving tests from FYI to mandatory, the Interop and Compliance Committee takes that pretty seriously. We're not looking to surprise anyone with new requirements or anything like that. So definitely thought goes into things before moving it from an FYI test to a mandatory test. And in fact, some tests that we felt weren't really mature enough or not quite ready or maybe had errors in them, we were sure to leave those as FYI so we didn't have any kind of burdensome requirements on people. So groups 1 and 2, remember those are the identify commands and some of the NVMe admin commands. There were quite a few new test cases in those groups that got moved to mandatory. And then also groups 7, 8, and 9 are now mandatory if supported. Group 7 is reservations, group 8 is automated power states, and group 9 is namespace management. So if your device supports those features, there are some mandatory tests associated with it now if you support those. Now, some notable ones that got a fair amount of discussion in the ICC and actually remained as FYI tests are case 5 in our write zeros test, and case, that's test 2.5, and also case 5 in our write uncorrectable test, test 2.7. These ones, we actually had to change the tests due to an ECN number 3 for NVMe spec 1.2.1. So that ECN actually impacted a change to the tests. So we've made the update to the test, but that happened between Plugfest number 6 and today. So those subtests are going to remain FYI. And so that just kind of illustrates that the Interop and Compliance Committee doesn't move things to mandatory without some serious thought. So those ones are remaining FYI. But the latest version 7 NVMe Conformance Suite, it's up on the UNH IOL site now. It's actually been up since March 22nd, along with a redline version. So you can follow this link and download that latest NVMe Conformance test specification, and you'll see all the tests that have been outlined as mandatory, FYI, or mandatory if supported. So really encourage you to look in that. That's where you're going to find all of the details. On the interop front, there is an interop portion to our integrators list program. For this round, we haven't made any significant changes to the interop tests. So if you've spent time with those tests before, you know that we do a read and write test with 5 systems. We do a boot test with 2 systems. And if it's a U.2 device, regular drive form factor, we'll do a hot plug test with 1 system. We're still doing that. No real changes there. We have posted the VD bench scripts that we use for the read and write test up on our box file share. So those are available to everybody that's going to be attending the event and participating in the program. So no real changes on the interop front. Either way, we did rev the test doc. It's also a version 7.0, and that too is available on our test suites page. So you can look at that if interested. The interop systems that we'll be using, again, no real major changes here. These are the similar systems that we used last time. One thing we want to make clear, these are the systems that are available for interop. That read-write test, you only need to pass with 5 of these systems. Rarely is that a problem for folks that are coming through during the Plugfest or even on our weekly testing. We do provide the option that we can update drivers if necessary, update operating systems if necessary, if we think that there happens to be some that are causing problems. But these are the interop systems you can expect to use when you attend the event. Now, one really significant change that we're doing this time around is NVMe AMI. So I'll provide some detail on that. We're actually going to be launching a separate new integrators list for SSDs that support NVMe AMI. Now, if you've been following NVMe AMI at all in the MI workgroup within the NVMe organization, you might have known that test development was kind of spearheaded by Teledyne LaCroix. They've created that or helped edit that first test specification. and outlined a number of conformance tests, and the NVMe work group has had spent a lot of time preparing that. And that's really going to serve as the basis for the testing that we're going to be launching for NVMe AMI next month. Now, right now, the NVMe integrators list does not have an interop requirement. It's just going to be based on those conformance tests that were defined by the NVMe AMI work group. That test suite as well is posted. It's up on the UNH IOL site, so you can download and see which tests there are FYI, which tests there are mandatory. Now, one thing I want to make really clear to folks is that the NVMe list, the base NVMe list based on the NVMe specification, and the NVMe integrators list are independent. That means if a product qualifies for the NVMe list and maybe doesn't qualify for the MI list, that's okay. It'll just get listed on the NVMe list. They're not prerequisites for one another. They're going to be separate lists with their own requirements. So we're excited to be launching that management interface integrators list after this Plugfest. So this will be the first opportunity to perform some of that conformance testing at the event. So we're excited about that. Another thing that we get a lot of questions about is NVMe over fabrics. I wanted to take an opportunity in the webinar and let folks know what's happening, or maybe more accurately, not happening there. For this upcoming Plugfest number 7, there's no NVMe over fabrics integrators list. There's no formal tests that are defined. The Interop and Compliance Committee hasn't spent any time defining NVMe over fabrics testing or requirements. So I want to make that clear. But of course, there's a lot of industry interest in this. And so we would like to provide the opportunity for folks to do some experimental ad hoc testing at the event. And so in order to facilitate that, we're inviting people that have NVMe fabrics products, whether they be Ethernet based or otherwise, to attend the event. And we're going to try and do some ad hoc testing. Now, I want to emphasize again, this is not to qualify anything for an integrators list today, but simply to be an ad hoc experimental test. And some of the things that we'll try and do are listed here below. First, we do have a beta edition of our IOL Interact software that works on different transports. So I'll provide a little more details on that later in the webinar, but one of the things that we're going to do is try and run that software and see how well does it work on different transports and different hardware. We've got about 30 of our base NVMe tests implemented there. So what I mean by base NVMe tests is in the NVMe test specification, we've got a bunch of tests that are taken directly from the NVMe spec. And basically what we've done is implemented those tests in our software test tool and allowed them to run over different transports. So that'll be one thing that we might try out in that ad hoc testing. We may also try and build a simple interop fabric for Rocky. But one thing we also want to make clear is we're not going to interfere with the folks' primary objective of this event. Of course, people are bringing PCIe-based SSDs. They're bringing SSDs that support NVMe AMI. We don't want any of the effort or time or resources that goes into doing some of this fabrics ad hoc testing to interfere with our primary NVMe testing. So one thing to keep in mind there, if your company or if you're intending on bringing products that potentially could be on the NVMe list and the NVMe list, and then maybe another product that is a fabrics product, make sure that you bring enough samples and make sure that you bring enough engineering staff to support both of those products. We don't want to have a case where maybe a SSD isn't getting the time and attention that it deserves because folks are busy doing the ad hoc testing. So please pay attention to that. If you do have fabric stuff, please reach out to us directly so we can talk about that, since that's a very ad hoc and experimental thing, but exciting nonetheless. Here's a little diagram of the possible interop setup that we might do using Rocky and trying to connect to NVMe storage over that. All right, next item is test tools. What test tools are we going to use and what's available? So not a lot of changes here either in terms of the test tools that we're using. Here's a nice table showing you what tools can be used for the different tests. You'll see our IOL software tools there on the left. used for groups 1 through 10. And you can download that on our UNH box file share. And you remember our PC edition works on Ubuntu 16.04. In the middle there, Teledyne LaCroix, if you're using one of their hardware solutions, you can do groups 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10, as well as NVMe AMI. You know, they really spearheaded the work there. And also available on our box file share is scripts for doing those groups 1 through 10. The NVMe software is available directly from LaCroix if you're looking to get support there. One thing to pay attention to, if you are preparing testing with the LaCroix tool, be sure to use PE Tracer version 8.50. That's the one that our scripts are supporting. And then finally, if you're familiar with Oakgate, they have some software for doing groups 7 and 9. Those are the reservations and namespace management tests. So these are the things you'll be wanting to pay attention to as you're preparing for the event. Now, a little bit about the UNH IOL tools. We've actually released version 7.0b of our PC edition tool late last month. That's the version that we're going to use at the Plugfest. So if you're preparing for the Plugfest and maybe you've got version 6K or version 6L, nope, don't use that. Be sure to download the newest one. We've got version 7.0b up on our file share right now, so be sure to download that newest one and start your preparation that way. Now, I did mention a beta version of our software test tool. If you happen to be working on NVMe fabrics, we do have a beta version also available on our box file share. This is the one that we'll be using at the Plugfest for some ad hoc testing, but by no means will be using this for integrators list testing. So if you've got a fiber channel or Rocky-based NVMe OF product, please feel free to download this one, try it out. It's definitely a beta piece of software, and it's not being used for integrators list testing at this moment, but it's something that we're trying to improve and work on as we move towards possibly doing NVMe OF testing in the future. So please be aware that is available. Now, of course, one of the big things, there's many dozens of types of SSDs out there, different SKUs, different companies. And so here at UNH, we want to make sure that our software is supporting all of the different variables in the NVMe spec and all the different types of devices that are out there. And with that variety comes issues and bugs. So we want to make sure that folks are up to speed on how they can report bugs that they find in our tools. In the past, a lot of times people would just email our NVMe lab email reflector at UNH IOL, and of course, you know, people are still welcome to do that. But what we're trying to encourage people to do is do that in a little more organized fashion. All the folks that are members of our test service should have a login to the UNH IOL My IOL site, and so we've recently added a feature there to help you report bugs and issues found in our software to us. So I'll just do a little walkthrough here, and maybe next time you find an issue or bug you want to report, you'll be able to do this. But like I said, everybody should have a login to our site. You can find that from our homepage to log in. Once you log in, it'll bring you to a page that looks like this. It'll show you what groups you have memberships in at the IOL. It'll show you some of our contacts. And one thing you want to pay attention to is over on the right, the ability to report an issue with a tool. You see that menu on the right towards the bottom, report a tool issue. If you click on that, it'll bring you to a page where you can select the tool and provide some information on the environment that you're using, hardware, software, etc. And then also any details about the issue that you discovered. We don't have the ability yet to include trace files with this. So maybe you have a log file that you want to attach as a file attachment. We don't have that ability yet, but we're working on it. But for many cases, we think this is a nice little improvement for folks that are reporting issues with our tools. So if at all possible, we'd encourage you to use that when you're reporting an issue, or if you have a feature that you think you would like to see implemented in our tools. All right. Moving along, a little bit about how to prepare for the event. I know a lot of folks have attended before, maybe this is old hat to you. You know exactly what to do for the Plugfest, but for the folks who are new, just a couple pointers on things you can do to make sure that the Plugfest goes smoothly for you. So first, download the test tools and run them on your product. So a lot of those test tools are available on our UNH IOL box file share. Download them, get them up and running in your lab. The ones that are up there now are the ones that we're going to use at the Plugfest. So if you download that and you run it in your lab and you see passing results in your lab, and then you bring it here, we're going to run the same tool. You have real high confidence that you're not going to run into any gotchas or mistakes or anything. So really encourage people to run those tests ahead of time. And as I said, since there's so many variables in the NVMe spec, a variety and types of SSDs, the possibility exists that there's bugs there. Please report them to us and let us either help you fix that bug in the product, or if it's a bug in our tool, we want to get that fixed as soon as we can. So that's kind of the first thing, is get those tools up and running in your lab and make sure everything's passing ahead of time. The second thing, when you're coming to the Plugfest, make sure you bring at least 2 samples of each product that you have testing. Now, the conformance tests only require 1 sample, but the interop tests require 2 samples to be used simultaneously. So make sure you have at least 2 samples of your product. We don't want anything to get, any testing to be roadblocked because, there's not enough drives to be tested. So please bring at least 2. Honestly, I'd advise you to bring more if possible, just in the off chance that maybe there's some issue in shipping or travel, so that you always have 2 available. Next, if you have a particularly large product, and this is sometimes the case if you're using a PCIe development board, like a large eval kit, sometimes those boards are too big to fit in a PC or server case. If you've got a big product like that, make sure you bring a PCIe Flex or a riser cable so that we can still perform the interop testing. For the interop testing, a lot of times we're plugging it into a server or a PC, and there may be that's designed for a shipping product, one that's already been integrated and it's much smaller. If you've got a big eval board, please bring one of these flex cables so that we can still be sure to be able to connect that to the servers as necessary. We'll have a few of these if you forget them or don't have them, but again, just to make sure there's no roadblocks, we advise you bring your own. On a similar front, we'll have chem adapters to use both for interop testing and for the conformance testing. So if you have a non-chem form factor like M.2 or U.2 drive, and you have an adapter that maybe you know and trust that you use in your lab, again, please bring it, and please bring at least 2. Bring enough for the products that you're going to have testing or being tested simultaneously. We'll have some, but again, I don't want anybody to get any kind of roadblock because there's not adapters available. And if you are looking for those adapters, I know that they're available from Serial Cables. They're also available from Teledyne LaCroix if you're looking for those. Finally, there's all kinds of little things that can go wrong during an event when you travel a long ways. So make sure that if you need to have a PC or any kind of special cables for flashing your drive or software for doing that to reprogram it, please bring that. Be ready to do that if it becomes necessary. We can provide you some things. We got a soldering station in there if it comes to that. Simple serial USB cables, keyboards and mice, we can provide those to you if necessary. But anything specialized, anything specific to especially flashing your drive, reprogramming the firmware, things like that, please be sure to bring that on your own. We will be providing both wired and wireless internet for folks, so you don't have to worry about that while you're in the lab. All right, so finally we get now to logistics. For those of you that have traveled here before, this next section, well, it's pretty brief, but it may be familiar to you, so I'll try and breeze through this as quickly as possible. So first, hopefully it's not a surprise, Plugfest is running Monday through Thursday, May 22nd through 25th. Doors will open at 8 a.m. Each day. We'll run testing until about 6 o'clock. We'll plan on doing a kickoff meeting Monday at 11 to make sure that we're all on the same page and familiar with the schedule, familiar where the different test stations are. We'll have a light breakfast and we'll have a nice lunch provided each day. We always get a lot of questions about the schedule and the agenda for devices. We'll provide that to folks that have registered after registration closes. Registration is going to close May 1st. So after that, we'll know who's coming to the event, we'll know who's bringing what, and we'll be able to make the schedule, and we'll provide that to all the attendees. So we won't have that available until May 2nd. And the doors might open at 8, but depending on the number of products that register, we may start testing at 8:30 or maybe even 9, depending on what happens, depending on how many folks register. Here is the link for registering. Hasn't changed since our last event. You go there, find our registration page. We're going to close that on May 1st. And we do put some limits on what you can register. When you register, you can register up to 2 products. And if you have more than 2 products, those will be waitlisted. And basically what that ensures is that as many companies as possible can get to attend the event with at least 2 products. Now, if after registration closes, you've had some products that got waitlisted and there's still spots left, of course, we'll welcome those to attend. But we want to make sure that we provide opportunity to as many companies as possible first. So please pay attention to that when you're registering. We'll also register up to 4 engineers. And if you have more folks, there'll be a small fee for covering the expenses of having an additional engineer. But you'll see that on the registration. Another thing that's pretty important is please no photos to be taken in the Plugfest space. There's folks bringing perhaps products that are still in development, still in the evaluation phase, and so we ask that you respect the confidentiality of your colleagues and not take any photos. And we'll remind you that everybody that's attending has agreed to the confidentiality terms in the UNH IOL usage agreement. UNH IOL, we may have photographers come in and take some generic photos. They certainly won't be taking any product photos or anything like that. But if you are interested in maybe getting access to those generic photos, certainly you can feel free to talk about that with us. Also, if you'd like a photo of your team, maybe folks have traveled from a long way to get here, or you want to take a photo of your own equipment setup, please check with us first. Obviously, if you ask to take a photo of your team or your own equipment, we're going to say yes, but just so that we know what's going on and don't have any kind of surprises. So please check with us first before doing that. A little bit more on travel and logistics. If you need a visa invitation letter, feel free to email Carrie. Here's her email address, carriemunson@iol.unh.edu. Also, our shipping address here. We want to make sure that all the equipment that needs to be shipped is going to arrive the Friday before the event, so that's May 19th. So please make sure that any shipments are going to arrive by then, and we can make sure that your shipments are sitting on your table when you arrive for the Plugfest on Monday morning. We got travel info on our website there, the link for our visitors about where you can stay. And as far as getting to New Hampshire and getting to our facility, there's the Manchester Airport, about an hour from us. Boston Airport, about an hour and a half, and also train. If you don't want to drive up to Durham, there actually is train service from downtown Boston right into Durham, so you're welcome to take the train as well. And certainly if you have questions about details in any of these, feel free to contact us. We can provide any other information. For parking, we'll be parking a little bit of ways from the lab. It's probably about a 5-minute walk from the visitor lot for University of New Hampshire up to the IOL. So of course, all the folks that register will be sure to send you this map and directions on how to walk from the parking lot to the lab. I will also provide you a parking code so that when you get to that lot, you can just punch in that code and get complimentary parking there. So that's the logistics, that's everything to help us prepare for the event. I'd like to open it up now for questions and answers and maybe provide some clarification of things we talked about today.
Yeah, thank you again, David, for the presentation. As David mentioned, please feel free to submit your questions. I know we did get a question from Young, but I think we may have answered that regarding the dates of the event as well as the URL for registration. And I believe David just covered that. Just another reminder, we will be sending out the presentation to everyone as long as a recorded version of today's webinar. So if there are any questions, please feel free to enter them in your question box. So it looks like we have a question here from Alan. Will testing schedule start on Monday at 8 a.m.?
Yeah, I think usually the first part of the day on Monday we leave for setup and things like that. So probably the earliest we would start testing would be lunchtime on Monday. And also understanding a lot of folks may be taking red-eye flights or maybe very early morning flights to get in. So we try and leave Monday morning relatively flexible. So I wouldn't expect any testing to be happening Monday morning first thing.
We have another question here from Ryan. What is the version of the Oakgate software?
Oh, good question. For that, I would defer to Oakgate, but I'm going to follow up on that and get that information from them so we can include that. And one thing I want to also highlight is, the questions that we get, we'll be sure to include in the version of the slides that we distribute to folks. So I'll make sure I get an answer on that before sending out those slides. Good point.
So we have another question from Yang. On the box, I only see Interact PC, not the LaCroix version. Is there something he's missing, or is he wrong?
Yeah, they both are up there, Yang. So I'll be sure to send you the link to that. They are both up there, but they are separate files. So I'll be sure to follow up with you after this. And of course, anyone, if you're not seeing what you expect to see on the box file share, reach out to us directly because they both are up there. But I'll send you a direct link for that, Yang, no problem.
A question here from Tony for David. I may miss the version 7.0 A-B for both editions under Plugfest. Not.
Yeah. So I should clarify. The version 7.0, all of the tests that are in there are ones that have been selected by the Interop and Compliance Committee. We're not adding any more tests or any new requirements between now and the Plugfest. Those things are static. But there are times when people find bugs, of course, that we want to make sure that we fix. And so that's what that 7.0 B. So I would advise you to download B.
So unless we don't have any other questions, I think we might be able to, oh, we got one more. So Tony has a question about the test case, which is FYI in progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the in progress test cases that you'll see there, those are ones that basically the implementation of them is not done. So according to the spec, this is a valid test item, but we have not completed the scripts or software for actually executing that fully. So we mark that as in progress. So that's not a requirement for the integrators list. And even, once we complete it, it would become an FYI test, and we'd want to run that test through a Plugfest before it even became a requirement. So you might think of the in-progress tests as being at least 2 Plugfests away from being mandatory. But the in-progress ones are not requirements today.
A question from Alan. When will Carrie issue the testing schedule?
Yeah, you can expect the schedule to be the week of May 1st. So, we'll get the registration to close on May 1st, and usually we'll need to follow up with folks on the 2nd and 3rd about maybe clarifications on what they registered and things like that. And the first draft of that schedule we'll send out probably that Friday or possibly the following Monday. So that would put you at either May 5th or May 8th for having the schedule available.
Just another follow-up from Tony. FYI will be mandatory, right?
No. FYI is for your information. They're informative tests. They're not required for the integrators list. The only ones that are required are the ones that are marked mandatory in the test suite.
Well, thank you everyone again for attending today's webinar to help prep for the upcoming NVMe Plugfest, once again, May 22nd through the 25th. We appreciate your time. I believe we answered all the questions today, and as David mentioned, we'll be sure to include all the Q&As at the presentation that we'll be distributing either later today or more likely tomorrow. Once again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email or contact Carrie Munson. Her email again is carrie.munson@iol.unh.edu. And on behalf of the UNH IOL, thank you again for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, Mara.